Sorry, folks, you can't just play an E7 instead of an E. I know it's a lot easier, but the theory isn't quite there. New ukulele tutorials every Wednesday and Saturday. If you like this kind of content, hit subscribe, ring the bell, never miss a lesson. Printable tabs by becoming a Patreon, links in the notes as well as the description. My emails there if you want some one-on-one lessons. Okay, so you've subscribed, thought about becoming a Patreon. Let's talk some theory. Now, before we jump in, I'm going to say you can't, but at the end of the day, there aren't any rules. And if it's dramatically easier for you, and it sounds okay, go ahead. But I'm also going to explain the theory behind it, and while maybe it sounds okay, it really doesn't sound right. Why is that? To fully understand this concept, you have to understand that we have two types of 7 chords. We have a major 7 and a 7, meaning we have an E major 7, which sounds like this. And we have an E7, which is also known as an E dominant 7, which sounds like this. Very dramatic change in sound. And of course, to keep our ears balanced, let's hear the triad. E major sounds like this. E major 7, E7. Okay, so what's the difference between a major 7 and a dominant 7? I'm not going to survive this lesson without a fan. Give me a second. As most of the air isn't going into the microphone, I think we're going to be okay. But it was just getting way too hot too fast. In the Western world of music, we have 12 notes. All of these notes together are what are known as the chromatic scale. Meaning if I start on this E note and I play all the way to my octave here, I'm going to play 12 notes. And if we determine that E is our tonal center, which means we're making the key E, and that can be anything from E major to E minor, including modes, E mixolydian, E Dorian, we've designated our E as our home base, our tonal center, the sun, which all the other notes are going to rotate around. Okay? Now, depending on the distance from the E, we get a different interval. For example, E to this F sharp, which is 2 notes away, is what's known as a second interval. And this particular interval has been known for kind of its funky flavor. If I go up just 1 note to F, that is what's called a flat second. Think Jaws. Also very common in Andalusian music. So each of these 12 intervals has a different distinct flavor. Now, having said that, they're not just numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then where we start over again. The reason that is because originally the piano just started out with 7 tones, and over time it added notes. So we originally had our 7 intervals, and then over time we added more intervals. Root, flat second, second, flat third, third, fourth. There's no flat third, or there's no flat fourth, for example. Flat fifth, fifth, flat six, six. And here comes the most important for today's lesson, the most important 2, flat 7 and a 7, and then back to our E. That means relative to the tonal center of E, D sharp is the 7th interval, and D is a flat 7th interval. Okay, so let's throw up this key chart here. Now, in a major key, your 1 chord, your 4 chord, and your 5 chord are going to be major chords. So as we have 3 major chords per key, we can find the E chord in 3 different keys. We see the E chord in the key of E, of course. We see it as the 5 chord in the key of A. We see it as the 4 chord in the key of B. So the question there becomes, of those 3 keys, which of those would have an E major 7? And which of those would have an E7? Let's start with the key of E. The key of E has 4 sharps. We have an E, which is our root. Then we have an F sharp, which would be our second interval, G sharp, which would be the major third, A, which would be our fourth, B is our fifth, C sharp is our sixth interval, D sharp is our seventh interval, and E is our octave. So we have E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, back to E. Now the way you turn a scale into chords is you play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note. So if I want to see what, and each of these notes creates a chord. So I'll give you an example. We start with an E note, and this E will be a chord. Well, what kind of chord is it? To figure that out, we play a note, skip a note, play a note, skip a note. So we play the E, skip the F sharp, play the G sharp, skip the A, and play the B. E, G sharp, and B make an E major chord. So you can use that method with the major scale to see how you construct every chord in the key. If I go to an F sharp, I would skip the G sharp and play the A, and then I would skip the B and play the C sharp. These notes create an F sharp minor. If you do that process for every single chord, you're going to see that the major scale always creates the same pattern. Your one chord is a major chord. Really hammering home this hand point today. Your two chord is always a minor. Your three chord is always a minor. Your four chord is a major. Your five chord is a major. Your six chord is a major. And your seven chord is a diminished. Again, I want to emphasize that this is with the major scale, not the minor scale, not the Mixolydian mode, the major scale. So with that information, we can revisit the scale and see that our E will become E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished, and then back to our E. That has a lot of value because now you can look at the notes in the major scale and instantly know all the chords. That works for any major scale in any key. Just look at the notes, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Easy. Now, what does all this have to do with getting back to just not being able to play an E7 whenever we want? Well, 7 chords, the extensions are made the exact same way. So you continue the play a note, skip a note method. So with E, we get E, skip the F sharp, play the G sharp, E, skip the F sharp, play the G sharp, skip the A, play the B, then we skip the C sharp and we play the D sharp. That means we get an E major 7 because we add the D sharp, which is the 7th interval. Take an E major, add a D sharp, the 7th interval, you get E major 7. Take an E, add the flat 7th interval, the D, and you'll get an E7. That's why if you're in the key of E and you're playing a progression, let's say it goes E, A, B, A, right? E, A, B, A, E, A, B, E7, A, B, A, E7, A. That doesn't work because the key of E doesn't have an E7. The key of E has an E major 7. That chord, the note, the G note, just isn't in the scale. The major 7 chord occurs naturally with the extensions of the 1 and the 4 chord. So the same way we said in our major scale, it goes major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Our 1 chord will always be a major 7. So in the key of E, E major 7. Our 2 chord, well, all the minors will automatically become minor 7s. So our 2 chord, our F sharp minor, will automatically become an F sharp minor 7. Which is an F sharp minor with a flattened 7th added to it. The flattened 7th is one whole step below the F sharp, meaning it would be an E. So that means if we take an F sharp minor chord and add an E note to it, we get the F sharp minor 7. The 3 chord works the same way. The G sharp will become a G sharp minor 7. The 4 chord also becomes a major 7. So your A major would become an A major 7. Your 5 chord, however, becomes a dominant. So the B becomes a B dominant 7, or what we know as a B7. C sharp minor becomes C sharp minor 7. One of the more goofy chords in these 7th extensions is actually the diminished chord. When you take the diminished chord and you do the formula play a note, skip a note, the note that you create actually doesn't become a diminished 7. You're going to play a chord called a minor 7 flat 5. In the key of E, that would be a D sharp minor 7 flat 5. It's a cool chord. It's tense. It's 6 on the G string, 6 on the C string, 5 on the E string, 6 on the A string. So we've taken our key of E and we've laid out all the extensions all the way across the board. We see we have an E major 7. And now we know the difference between major 7 and 7. We have an F sharp minor 7, G sharp minor 7. Our 4 chord also a major 7, A major 7. 5 chord is our 7, B7, C sharp minor 7, and then we have that minor 7 flat 5, the C or the D sharp minor 7 flat 5. Then we get back to where we started with the E. And seeing as our E chord exists in 3 different keys as a 1, a 4, and a 5, we need to examine the other keys to see if we can make an E7. So let's look at the other 2 keys where we see the E. Let's start with the key of B. Key of B is not very fun to play. You have a B flat, or you have a B chord, which we know 1 chord becomes major 7. So we have a B major 7 as one of our chords. Not easy to play either. 2 chord, C sharp minor 7. D sharp minor 7. Our 4 chord E would become E major 7. 5 F sharp 7. The 6 chord, so that leaves just the 6 and the 7 chord. 6 chord would be our G sharp minor, which would become G sharp minor 7. And if you go 1 step below a B, you get an A flat. So you'd either have an A flat diminished chord or an A flat minor 7 flat 5. So looking at the 7th extensions in the key of B, and the key of B is just a key we're not playing a lot of on the ukulele, but if you do look at them, you'll see that we still use E major 7 as opposed to E7. So when the heck do we actually use the E7 chord? The key of A is our root. Our 2nd interval would be B. Then we go into our 3rd, C sharp. 4th is D. 5th is E. 6 would be F sharp. 7 would be G sharp. And then we get back to A. So let's use what we've learned so far to turn the A major scale into chords. Well, our 1 chord, our first note A, becomes a major chord, A major. And we know the 1 is a major 7. So we have A major 7. 1 1 0 0. Now, if you know these intervals, you can also learn how to construct these chords without having ever seen them. Take an A chord. You know, an A chord, for it to become an A major 7, we have to add a 7th interval. A 7th interval relative to A is a G sharp note, because we know from here, we go all the way up to here to find that 7th interval, G sharp, right? Flat 2nd, 2nd, flat 3rd, 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, 5th, flat 6th, 6th, flat 7G, 7G sharp, back to A. So we take an A chord, and if we just put a G sharp in it, 1 note down from this A note, we have an A major 7. 1 1 0 0. Beautiful chord. The next note after that is a B. We know 2 chord B minor becomes B minor 7. 3rd note is C. We've seen now that our 3rd chord C sharp becomes a minor, also a minor 7, C sharp minor 7. Our 4 chord in this case, D. The 4 chord extended becomes a major 7, so we would have a D major 7. And our 5 chord. Our 5 chord becomes a 7, meaning we take our E chord, we add a D note to it, and we turn it into an E7, the chord that you've been waiting for. 6 in the key of A would be F sharp. So we have F sharp, which will become an F sharp minor 7. And of course, the 7th interval is G, meaning we have a G sharp diminished. And when the G sharp diminished is extended, the G sharp diminished becomes a G sharp minor 7 flat 5. So if you've been paying attention, what have you learned so far? You've learned more about the Roman numerals. You've learned how to look at the major scale and instantly turn it into chords by going major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. You've also learned the difference between a major 7 chord and a dominant 7 chord or a 7 chord, and how they exist naturally in the major scale, major 7 as 1 and 4 chords, and the dominant 7 exists only as the 5 chord. So that question, well, can I just play an E7? Only if it's the key of A. That's the answer. So you're looking at a progression in the key of A that goes A, F sharp minor, D, and E. In fact, I think that's when the night has come and the land is dark and the light from the moon is the only light we'll see. This time I will replace that E chord with an E7 because diatonically I can, yes I can. And by diatonically in that stupid little song that I made up right there, meaning that we're using a note in the scale. For an E7 to become an E7, it needs a scale that has a D note. B has a D sharp, E has a D sharp, the key of A has a D. So that's why it works there. E7 to the A, or the dominant 7 to the 1, is the strongest resolution in all of music because you have 2 half steps. When you go from an E7 to an A, the G sharp in the E7 goes up 1 step to the A, which is a very satisfying resolution. Just that sound there is very satisfying. We also have D, which is the 4th interval going to the 3rd, the C sharp. Now, the 7th interval and the 4th interval are the 2 most dissonant intervals in the major scale. And the resolution from 4 to 3 and from 7 to 1 are the 2 most satisfying resolutions in the major scale. And we have both of those resolutions in just 1 change of chords. That's why this E7 to that A is so satisfying. And that's why that works the same in any key. The key of C, the 5 chord would be G. G can be a 7, G7, and G7 to 1 does the same thing. The F goes 1 note to the E, and the B 1 to the C. But there you have it, folks. That's why, can you just play the E7? Well, it depends. So this is really more of a lesson on 7th extensions, intervals, keys, and how all of those things work. And hopefully you have a little bit stronger grasp of music theory in general after watching this lesson. All right, until next time, keep on rocking and rolling. I just made this joke up in my brain. What did the musical composing Terminator say to the police chief? I'll be back. Like the composer, Bach. I'm out.